On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we preview KU's road tilt in Morgantown at the West Virginia Mountaineers.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Jock Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere that you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the action. On today's episode of the show, we are previewing Kansas at West Virginia, Saturday game for the Jayhawks. We'll discuss that on this episode of LOJ. First, we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So we'll start with our top storylines, move on to our West Virginia scouting report, then get to our matchups of the game, player matchup of the game, and our Hawks to Soar KU players we think can stand out and have themselves good games for KU. Let's start with the storylines coming into this game. I think Johnny Furphy looking to build off his second start into his third start this Saturday and really his breakout start against Oklahoma State, looking to build off of that and continue to move in the right direction. You know, we've seen games before, whether it was this year or last year, where a player who maybe you were hoping was going to turn the corner after their performance. I think of like MJ Rice in the Texas Southern game last year. I think of Nick Timberlake in the Yale game earlier this season, where you had a good game and Marco Jackson against Wichita State, but you were unable to capitalize on the momentum into the next game and continue to build forward for what that meant for the rotation, for you individually, your playing time. And with Johnny Furphy, we now see the big breakout game. Now, he had a solid game before this too, so it wasn't just, 0 points one game and then 15 the next. But build off that momentum, and it doesn't mean you have to have 15 a game, but go out there and have another productive game. Have a game where you're playing 25 to 30 minutes because you're playing well, where you're scoring 8 to 10 to 12 points. You're playing good enough defense. You're getting some rebounds and extra chance points. You want to see him build off of it to where you feel like, okay, it's not just a one-off, that you're getting that positive production, the arrows pointed in the right direction as the season goes on. Also, a big storyline coming into this one, KU's had past struggles in Morgantown, trying to finish off a 2-road game week. We talked about this coming into the week that, these were two of the worst road records for Bill Self in his time at KU. That Oklahoma State, Stillwater, always a tough place. I think he's 5-6 all time in his career at Morgantown. So they have a losing record there. It's been a tough place to play. The craziest part for me was always like Frank Mason never won in Morgantown over his 4 years. And I think the scary one as it pertains to this, because obviously this is much different, right? There's no more Bob Huggins at West Virginia. Josh Eilert has taken over as the head coach for the Mountaineers for this year. They brought in a bunch of transfers, lost a couple late due to the Bob Huggins situation. They've had some injuries and players not being eligible for the first portion of the season that they've kind of had to deal with over the course of the way. But no more Bob Huggins, no more of a Bob Huggins type team in terms of like typically when you had Bob Huggins, you had top 25 level teams. So you think about some of the prime years for them, seemingly between, I don't know, obviously they made the Final Four in whatever that was, like 2010, 2011. But really from, I guess, the 2010s where they had seemingly top 25 teams who were getting 3, 4, 5 seeds in the NCAA tournament, teams who were thorns in the side of KU and were Big 12 title contenders. That's no more, and it kind of left with Bob Huggins, at least for the near term in this very moment in time. So you're not playing one of those West Virginia teams on the road where it's like, yeah, okay, Frank Mason never won in Morgantown, but all those teams were like really good. They had, Javon Carter and some of these really good guards that they had. That's not the case with this one. But the scary thing is I look back to that 2019 version. It was the 2018-19 season. KU plays in January of 2019 at West Virginia. And that was a West Virginia team that finished 15-21 that year. And Kansas lost that game. So that kind of serves as like, okay, maybe even in years where they haven't been very good, you've still found a way to have troubles. Now, that was one of Bill Self's worst teams at Kansas. Ideally, you'd like to be better than that team. I do think there are some comparisons to this team to that team, though the way they played the last 2 games. I think maybe moving past some of those comparisons. Nonetheless, that obviously becomes interesting in this game that you had both these road tilts that you've typically struggled in at Oklahoma State and at West Virginia in the same week. The Big 12 title race becomes, I don't know, not more into focus too much because there's still only 4 games in, but things have started to shape up a little bit. You have some teams maybe emerging a little bit, like Baylor looks pretty good, but they just lost earlier this week. Tech started 3-0, then they got blown out by Houston. Kansas State has a pretty good start so far with a 3-1 record. They're only lost to Texas Tech, who's 3-1. Houston has 2 losses, but they kind of bounced back last night. Is the Big 12 title race starting to shape up? And because of how many losses that all these teams have taken already early in the season, makes you wonder, is that number going to change? Is what typically I view as like 14 to win the league and 13 gets your share. Last year, 12 would have got your share, 13 would have won you the league. Maybe it's more like that. Maybe it's even further than that. I do think Houston's going to start rolling here, looking at some of their upcoming schedule, that I still think they end up with 4 or 5 losses, maybe 6 at the most. But still, if you're looking at 13-5 to win the Big 12, Big 12 title race, every game, every road game. And at that point, if you can go 9-0 at home and then 4-5 on the road, then boom, you get to 13 wins. So that's kind of the challenge for KU, but winning each and one of these road games as they can. As far as the West Virginia scouting report, they're 6-11 on the season, only 1-3 to the start of Big 12 play. Their non-con was a bit rough. They had one of the tougher non-con schedules of Big 12 teams. It was like Kansas first, West Virginia second, Kansas State third. And they went 0-6 against top 100 opponents. So it really did not help them there. They had a 34-point loss once they started Big 12 play to Houston. So that did not get better. 14-point loss to Kansas State. Then they had a 3-point win at home against Texas. So that showed a little bit, though. Texas, there's starting to be some questions. They lose at home to UCF. Is Texas not a tournament team? I don't know. And then a 14-point loss just the other night against Oklahoma. As far as what they do well, they get to the free throw line a lot, top 60 in the country in free throw attempt per field goal rate. They are first in Big 12 only games in doing that. So they get a lot of free throw attempts. They also don't foul much at the other end of the floor. They don't send you to the free throw line much. So you're getting a nice boost every game as West Virginia at the free throw line. They've been really good at non-steal turnovers, top 80 in the country and first in Big 12 only games, which leads them to be second in league-only games in turnover rate defense. Despite the fact that they don't get really many steals, they're getting a lot of those non-steal turnovers. What are non-steal turnovers? Taking charges. That's obviously a big one. Forcing teams to dead ball turnovers. So, maybe you're pressuring the ball and they throw it out of bounds. Maybe a little bit of that can be a little bit of luck, like just having unforced turnovers come against you. But it's those ones that kind of add up all into the non-steal turnovers. Overall, they've been decent at 2-point defense, though that hasn't carried into conference play because Jesse Edwards, their stud center, has been injured so far. So when Edwards is available, their 2-point defense is pretty good. When he's not available, their 2-point defense is bad. We'll get more into that coming up later on. What they don't do well, okay? This is part of it. 56% 2-point defense in Big 12 only games. So again, when Jesse Edwards is not there, they're a bad 2-point interior defense. When he is, they're good. I don't know if he's going to play or not in this game. I'm guessing he's not, but it is possible. They also don't shoot well from 2 or 3-point range. It's not a good shooting team at all. They're only shooting 30% from 3, both overall and in Big 12 play. Total it up, and their effective field goal percentage is barely inside the top 300 of the entire country. They rank in the 200s and the bottom 4 of Big 12 games in both offensive and rebound and defensive rebounding rate. So they're not a good rebounding team. They get the ball stolen from them at the worst rate of the conference, meaning Kansas should have opportunities to get those live ball steal turnovers. The personnel for West Virginia consists of Noah Farrakhan. He's averaging about 12.5 points per game, 44% from the floor, low volume from 3. Kerr Kriisa, transfer from Arizona. He's getting 9.5 points, 5 assists, only shooting 37% from 2, but 36.5% from 3. So good 3-point shooter. And both of each have just played 8 games total. They've had to deal with some things that have kept some of their good players out of the lineup. Like some players have been injuries. Some players it's been Kerr Kriisa had to sit out first few games from some NCAA stuff. You have Kobe Johnson, who gets 7.3 points per game, 2.4 assists. He's mid-20s from 3. Seth Wilson is more of a bench shooter for them, 36% from 3 coming off the bench. Those guys will assort at the 1 and 2 position. Raekwon Battle, who's a transfer from Montana State, led them to the NCAA tournament. He's played the last 7 games. He missed the first portion of the season. Mostly is the 3. So again, definitely more talented, I would say, than the record shows when everyone's healthy and here. But they're still probably a bottom Big 12 team. But Battle makes them a lot better than they were the first half of the season. He is averaging 19 points per game, gives them a scoring option for a team that needs more of those. He's only shooting 41% from the floor and 26% from 3, but he can really get going in any specific game. Josiah Harris plays the 3 and the 4. He's only shooting 30% from the floor. Solid rebounder, 6'7", 215 wing. Besides that, it's mostly too big basketball. When Edwards is not there, you're going to see a lot of Patrick Sumnick at 6'8", 235 pounds, and Quinn Slazinski at 6'9", 230. Both of them will play the 4. Both of them will play the 5. Slazinski, the more notable of the two, 14 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2 assists, but low efficiency shooting the ball. And then Akok is a 6'10" wiry center who doesn't have much on the offensive end, but is a good shot blocker on the defensive end. So you'll see Akok at the 5. You'll see one of those other two at the 4. You might see one at the 4, one at the 5 at the same time. And then if Edwards is in there, it's just more of kind of two big basketball. Ideally, they would have Edwards back for this game if you're asking them. 15 points, 9 rebounds per game after transferring in from Syracuse. You could argue that if Edwards was healthy, Edwards versus Hunter Dickinson would be the two best centers, two most talented centers, two most skilled centers, whatever you want to say, in the Big 12. He fractured his wrist on December 16th. He's been out ever since then. It sounds like there was an update about 6 days ago that said he had taken the cast off and he was starting to practice, and then he could be about a week or two away. So that's 6 days ago. That would put this right around kind of the fringe of he could be back for this game, and that would be a big boon for West Virginia because they really haven't had everybody healthy at the same point in time. I do think if they have everybody healthy and playing with Kerr Kriisa and Raekwon Battle and Jase Edwards, I do view this to be, probably better than Oklahoma State. I don't know, maybe you could argue that they could get ahead of somebody else from there. I mean, it's just hard with how many good teams there are in the Big 12, but they do have a lot of talent that can sting you in a home game if that's true. If they don't have them, though, it's going to be tough sledding for them. It was already probably going to be tough sledding regardless, but especially on the inside. So we get to that with our matchups of the game, player matchups, and Hawks to Soar on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, we're brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We are also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move you can make that'll take your business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within just 24 hours. So check out LinkedIn Jobs, who makes the process intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. On to our matchups of the game, then we'll get to our Hawks to Soar. Thanks for tuning in here, and to the everydayers tuning in each and every episode with us on Locked On Jayhawks. All right, matchup number 1, KU avoiding dumb turnovers. You're the better team here. You play a good game. You play a clean game, I guess is the way to put it. You should be able to win. The path to West Virginia winning this game is, obviously anytime if a team, shoots a billion threes, which they do take a pretty good amount of threes so far in Big 12 play. If they hit them at a high rate, then that makes it difficult, whatever. But for the most part, it's going to take probably Kansas playing a C+ game and West Virginia playing an A game, or West Virginia playing a B game and Kansas playing a D game. And one of those things that could make it a C or a D game for Kansas is having dumb turnovers. Kansas is averaging a little bit more turnovers per game on the road than they are at home. 13.3 turnovers per game on the road, 11.9 turnovers per game at home. So they have been a bit worse there. That's not like an overly large difference, but it is at least a little bit there. West Virginia is not a great steal team, but they take charges. They force a lot of dead ball turnovers. Basically, they've had a lot of teams play dumb against them and run into charges. And that's a little bit different. Some of the past turnover teams that Kansas played against, UCF, right? They're throwing out zone with length and athleticism. TCU just has all sorts of athleticism and guys ripping the ball away from you. Those are different than playing against a team like this, who you have to be more, mindful of where you're running, when to set your feet, when to jump stop, not to make plays where you're jumping in the air and passing to somebody else. Although now with the new charge rules, it is a little bit different with doing some of that stuff, with allowing a player to come over and take some of that stuff. But especially when you're on the road, some of those 50-50 calls of the block charges, like they might go the other way a little bit more than maybe you're used to. So you have to play smart. You have to play on 2 feet. Don't just run and jump into random things. Don't get bothered by the crowd. Don't just give the ball away with unforced turnovers. Don't play stupid, because if you play a clean game, you're going to be fine. Don't let them into the game by doing something like that. Number 2 is foul trouble. West Virginia is top 55 in the country in free throw attempt per field goal attempt rate. They have that high non-steal turnover rate that we just talked about, so that's taking a lot of charges as part of that. Those are both 2 ways to rack up fouls. You're getting to the free throw line, you're earning fouls on the other team. You're taking charges, you're earning fouls on the other team. KU's done a good job avoiding foul trouble this season. There have been a few moments here or there for maybe like KJ Adams or Kevin McCullar or something. Obviously, the Hunter Dickinson one recently, where you think of in the UCF game that really hampered him and disallowed him from being on the court too much. That certainly sticks out. For a team that's not overly deep like Kansas, this is always kind of a worry game in and game out, but especially so when you're playing a team like West Virginia, who does a good job at forcing those fouls. And West Virginia does play a much deeper bench than Kansas. Not to say that West Virginia has, the more talented team or anything like that, but if they're going into the bench, if it becomes a bench game because of foul trouble, that does kind of favor West Virginia more than it does for Kansas. So avoid that foul trouble, especially key players like your bigs in Hunter Dickinson and KJ Adams, especially because I think Kansas can have an advantage on the inside, especially without Jesse Edwards. If he's not there, West Virginia's really struggled at the rim defense without Jesse Edwards. Number 3 is KU defending the mid-range. Against TCU, the Horned Frogs were a good mid-range team, one of the better ones in the country, and they took advantage of that. The big reason why Jameer Nelson Jr. has that little step back in the mid-range, he hit like 3 or 4 of them against Kansas. I think Tennyson hit that one like crazy mid-range where it was pretty well contested by Dajuan Harris. They hit some mid-range and were able to take advantage. Now, from the Kansas perspective, and kind of the analytic perspective, is don't give up open threes and don't give up shots at the rim and in the paint. And you're going to be more okay with teams shooting mid-range twos. And it kind of makes sense from a standpoint. Like, think about this. Okay. The value of a 3-point shot means that if you shoot 40% on threes, that is equivalent to shooting 60% on twos. Because that means that, okay, you're basically 60% on twos is 1.2 points per shot. 40% on threes is 1.2 points per shot. So if you're only shooting 40% on mid-range shots, which actually would be a pretty solid number if you're like TCU was one of the better ones in the country at 43%, right? That's a little different than shooting 50% in the paint, or that's a little bit different than 43% on a mid-range two would be almost the equivalent of like 29% on 3-point shots. So it's like, just take the 3 at that point. But, sometimes defenses give you the open mid-range, and if it's wide open, you take it. And sometimes you're not a great 3-point shooting team. You're better at mid-range, right? There are reasons to still take them, and it allows you to respect those other areas more if they are taking them. So that's just kind of the analytic way of viewing it. And so Kansas has, maybe given up a little bit more mid-range shots on the season, and most teams don't take advantage of it. Well, TCU was able to more than a lot of other teams. West Virginia does like to take them. They're in the 78th percentile in mid-range twos per field goal attempt on the season. And over the last 5 games they've played, they're in the 92nd percentile. So they're going to launch up a lot of mid-range shots. Problem for them, they haven't really gone in so far. They're only shooting 33.8% on mid-range twos this season. That's not a good number, but it gets even worse. Over the last 5 games, West Virginia is only shooting 28.3% on mid-range twos. Still, KU typically plays a defense where they say, if you want to take mid-range twos as opposed to taking shots at the rim or taking open threes, we're cool with you doing that. I guess the one thing in this is that because West Virginia likes to do that more and because Kansas doesn't mind you doing that more, what if they do take a high volume of it? And what if this is just one of those weird games where they're hot on mid-range twos? Then it becomes a bit of an issue, but you can, I guess, kind of adjust from there. So just kind of an interesting quirk in this game. Our player matchup is Dajuan Harris versus Kerr Kriisa. Now, Farrakhan plays some point for West Virginia. So does Kriisa. I don't totally know how Kansas is going to match this up. I do think there are some similarities here between Kriisa and Harris. I think Harris is a better version, and most of it derives from being the better defender. When you look at the offensive numbers, neither guys are big scorers, both single-digit point per game guys. Both of them, between Kriisa and Harris, are shooting sub 40% on 2-point shots, but both are shooting really strong 3-point percentages and know when to kind of pick and choose them. Now, both get good assist numbers per game. Harris is better. He's at closer to 7 per game. Kriisa is at 5. Kriisa also is more willing to take threes and take them in a myriad of different ways than Harris is. Harris is also the much better defender. Kriisa hasn't been known as being a very good defender, and Harris has also been less risky. Kriisa, going back to his Arizona time, there's a lot of moments during the game. Like, he's one of those guys who runs very hot and cold. It's kind of like a J.R. Smith, that there's going to be games where it's like, oh my gosh, this guy is like winning you the game. And then there are going to be other moments where it's like, he's 0 for 10, but he keeps shooting, it's kind of like that. But Kriisa is averaging 3 turnovers per game. He has an assist to turnover ratio of 1.67, which among players in the Big 12 with 3 or more assists per game, that is tied 15th. Harris, meanwhile, is averaging 2.5 turnovers per game, and his assist to turnover ratio is 2.76, so much better, which among players with 3+ assists per game is 4th in the Big 12, only behind Jamal Shead at Houston by a little bit, and 2 of the BYU guys. So should be a fun matchup there. And I think Dajuan Harris, because Kerr Kriisa will be a little bit turnover prone, should be a good game for Dajuan to be able to go ahead and get some steals. We're going to continue on with our Hawks to Soar. Jayhawks, we think, can have good games for KU based on the matchup. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. It's got a great interface. There's a bunch of different ways that you can bet on the action. They have live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. You can get in on Kansas to win the national championship at 20-1 right now on FanDuel. That was 25-1 before their last game. So if they win this game blown out again, then maybe that number goes up even more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, finishing up with Hawks to Soar. KU players we think can have good games based on the matchup against West Virginia. The first of which, I'm going to go with Kevin McCullar. Now, Kevin's going to have his hand full on the defensive end of the floor. I'd imagine he's going to be guarding Raekwon Battle. Battle will score a lot. He will be very active. He shoots a lot, so it's going to exert a good amount of energy from Kevin McCullar. Kansas has been the much better transition team, though. We know Kevin is a good transition player. He's got good vision in transition. He'll hit transition kind of trailer threes. He can drive to the rim and everything. But Raekwon Battle, if that's the matchup there for Battle on McCullar, Battle has not been a very good defender. Now, maybe, you look at the defensive BPM on Evan Miyakawa, he's like in the negatives. Maybe West Virginia says, okay, we're just going to try to hide him on Johnny Furphy. And then Kevin McCullar's matched up with somebody else. And which in that case, I would say, maybe a big game again for Johnny Furphy, but for right now, I'm going with Kevin McCullar. And then the other one is Hunter Dickinson. This is kind of preclusive to Jesse Edwards not being there. If Edwards is available in this game, Hunter Dickinson is an All-American. He's your go-to guy. He's still going to get his touches. He's still going to get his shots. He's still going to get his statistics. But it might not be takeover mode Hunter. It might be, 17 points on decent efficiency, 10 rebounds, right? Without Jesse Edwards, there's a real chance here that Hunter Dickinson finishes with 25, 30 points. Like, seriously. West Virginia allows opponents to shoot 65.7% at the rim so far. That puts them in just the 22nd percentile of the country, which is not great. And most of that has been derived since Jesse Edwards has been injured and unable to play, because the numbers were a lot better when they had Edwards. And here's the example why. Over the last 5 games, West Virginia is giving up 75.3% field goal percentage at the rim. That is literally nobody's worse. That is the worst in the country. 75.3% at the rim over the last 5 games. Without Jesse Edwards, the interior defense is Swiss cheese. And so if no Jesse Edwards, Hunter Dickinson should have a huge game on the inside. Plus, you add to it, West Virginia, not a great rebounding team. So he should put up, I think, some monster numbers. Again, barring no Jesse Edwards. If Edwards is in, I think that maybe becomes the player matchup of the game, honestly. And then that should be really fun either way. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the action. See you next time with LOJ for a KU West Virginia recap.